The Five of Swords is known as defeat, and it certainly shows a lot of that fear and troublesome nature of which the suit has built up towards this point. The Rider-Waite card shows two figures walking away from what appears to be a battle. They are sad, defeated and mournful, when a sly character picks up their swords and glances up back towards them. This shows a distrustfulness, a sadness, and a feeling that perhaps all our efforts have been in vain. The sky upon this Rider-Waite card is jagged and unpleasant, threatening rain, suggesting that although this battle is over, there is still trouble in the air, and all is not calm. On the Tree of Life, this card is Geberah, in that world of Yetzirah or formation, and so it's the coming upon our life of this defeat. Geberah is often known as might, and is suggestive of the punishing of the wicked, the judging of the souls of humanity, and so in this regard it can be the restraining of our urge to be good, of which we saw on the previous card, and it's just a melancholy, a strict letter of the law type of attitude where one cannot look outside of the straight and narrow and they can only see what's right in front of them, which is of course actually a very negative and false way of looking at the world. On the astrological side, the card is Venus in Aquarius, and this shows a great disconnect and incompatibility between the two, because Venus is beauty and love, and therefore is a nurturing aspect, whereas Aquarius is more rebellious. It is more logical in its outlook and appearing more confident in its manner because of that, although not necessarily, although its mode is fixed, whereas Venus is more concerned with the nurturing and a mother style aspect, and so really they're going to clash here, and especially so because Venus is often shown with the rose, and the rose is shattered upon this card. This is the same rose of which we saw on the Four of Swords, holding the swords together in a truce. There has been too much pressure and too much conflict, and the rose has actually shattered. It now forms the shape of an inverted pentagram. This is a symbol of which can often be quite misunderstood. It's used to frighten in a lot of mainstream sources attempting to demonise occultism. What it truly means here, however, is the physical world of matter and form, of which includes time and death and conflict, overpowering that of the spirit. And so if we have a look at the normal pentagram, of course, we've got the point at the top is spirit, consciousness, source, and the 4 points at the bottom are the 4 elements that make up our physical world. To flip it upside down places the 4 elements on top and the spirit at the bottom, so the spirit is less important or is overburdened by that nature of time and conflict and death and so on, of which we see in the physical world. And so with regards to the actual card, the conflict that we're in currently has defeated us. It's weighed us down on top of us, and so we can't express all of the things that we wanted to throughout the tarot journey so far, because we're bogged down with all of the horrors and the sadnesses and the negative aspects of the physical world. It is essentially crushing our spirit, and that's what that represents. The swords themselves are formed around this into relatively the same shape, and there are different designs upon each of the hilts of the swords. They all mean something different, connected into why our spirit is being crushed and what it feels like to be in that state. Perhaps the one which connects to that inverted pentagram image is the lowest sword, which would be in the space of spirit if we looked at the pentagram, and this indeed shows a crown. The crown being Kether, that white, spiritual, beauteous light here at the lowest point of the image, and suggesting therefore that we feel we are at a low point during this time in our lives. Of particular interest, the blade upon this sword is actually broken, and so here we have a physical representation of that feeling that we have been broken by something, that our spirit is broken, and so we feel that we have become weakened. This sword clearly couldn't be used in conflict anymore because it is damaged. It has been used too much, it has been put under too much pressure, just as the rose had done, and becomes, over time, shattered and damaged. The other swords here show a variety of different designs, and so we have a serpent here upon this sword. The serpent, that energy of transformation, of which we have seen many times throughout the tarot cards, that kundalini, that enlightenment, and that start of a journey. Well, here it's stuck, of course, because all of these swords can't move on, they're clashing with each other, and so it's showing that we can't find that spark within ourselves anymore to raise that energy upwards, such as that, like in that awakening experience where the energy rises up from the lowest chakra out of the crown. We can't do it anymore, at least for this time being. We feel like that spark of light has left us. We also see an image of a fish, of which here represents Pisces, but specifically it's the age of Pisces, which is the age in astrology that we're coming out of now, and yet we are still in a transitional phase of it. And yet it started right back in 1 AD, and so it is the world of the past, and all of the crowning glories of humanity throughout its different ages. And perhaps within our own minds, of which are still working overtime at this stage in the suit, it means that we can't move on from our own past, or that our own past, perhaps, is that thing of which is bogging us down and making us stuck in a rut. So we are preoccupied with the mistakes of which we've made in the past, and specifically the what-ifs and the I wish I hadn't, that type of thing. But we can't get the past back, and we can't actually do anything about it at all. And if our past is stopping us from moving forward, then we really are going to be stuck, which is what this card is showing. There is also the image of a twisted handkerchief, of which is drenched in a red pattern, of which clearly is supposed to be blood, and so this shows that all of these things we've been doing are actually physically hurting us, and spiritually as well, and so it's essentially saying this has opened up an old wound, and it's shown as a physical wound that's bleeding, but it doesn't have to be. It can be anything that produces fear in us. Often when we have a fear or a phobia, when we see it happening in front of us, it opens up old memories and old scars from our past, and suddenly our whole mood changes and becomes something a lot less pleasant and more focused again upon those miseries of the past. And that stops us from being able to move forward, which is what we see with the other symbol on the sword hilts here, which is the ram's horn. This suggests usually that one would take hold of the horns, of course, and control the movement, and so it shows that pushing forward and going onwards with life. And yet here, even if we grabbed hold of it, we wouldn't move, because all the swords are stuck together and they're literally blocking each other from moving on, and so it's saying we haven't got the inspiration to actually get up and do anything, which of course is something that shows up a great deal in situations of that crushing defeat that one feels. They just feel like they don't want to get out of bed and move on, and that's what it's saying, that even if we had both hands on those horns and were saying, come on, let's get out of this, we just haven't got the spark, that creative charge in us at the moment to do so, because at that time we're stuck in the present, we're stuck in the what is and the what was, rather than the what we want to be and how we want to move on. And so in that respect, it can represent that we're actually sabotaging ourselves by staying in that situation. We can see that in the background of the card, in that the twisted lines and all this chaos, of which represents the activity of the mind and the thoughts of the mind, are actually working against us. And so we've heard that saying before, like, we're our own worst enemy, and that really is showing up in here. The lines are twisting round into quite jagged and sharp shapes, of which would damage us. We're actually hurting ourselves, and yet that actually causes an endless cycle, because really this card is about fear, and it's a fear perhaps that those things of which caused us to get stuck in this position may just repeat, or that there's no way we could ever get out of them. And so it actually makes our consciousness work against itself, which is a very negative type of position to get yourself in. Which is why, amongst these shapes, they've actually formed shapes here which look, firstly, like swastika images, which are in a duality with themselves, so one is pointing one way and the other is pointing the other way. The one that's pointing clockwise, which is the traditional swastika image, represents the sun, and that's good luck, it's the day and all of the positive prosperity and things that comes from it. The counterclockwise image is the opposite, and in Hinduism it can represent the elements of Kali, of which is again time and destruction and perhaps quite a violent change and an overwhelming power and that type of thing. And so really the fact that they are pointing towards each other and are seemingly in conflict with each other is our own mind just not knowing where to go. We can also see at the top of the card that the images look like they're trying to create pentagrams. They're actually trying to draw pentagrams, and yet they're not working out. It looks like the hand has slipped, or that the shape hasn't quite formed correctly. And so this actually shows that we know that we're stuck in a rut. We're trying to get out of it. We know that that pentagram's the wrong way around, and we're trying desperately to get out of there. And yet, for the time being, it's perhaps not working. That's because we haven't got the clarity to see that. If we can see the image clearly in our mind, the job's already half done. That's why the blue upon this card is only in the edges around the card. And so the blue here is the sky, as we saw in the element of Jupiter from the previous card. And at the moment they've been pushed right to the edges because we're in so much stress and fear. And so we can't see the sky, we can't see the clarity to actually draw the images like we would want to. There is, however, in this card a hint of hope. Right in the very centre we can see this pinpoint image of bright white light, and so that shows that our spirit is well aware that it's not going to be here forever. It's trying to make itself shine, it's trying to make itself overcome the situation, and it knows that no matter how dark the night, the morning will come again at some point, and we really have to ride through this storm of fear. To draw the card really does suggest a type of fear, because fear distorts the things around us, which is everything that we see on the card is distorted. And so with fear we may lose control, either physically, emotionally, we may be hurt from previous relationships and things like that. And so this is the deep level of the Suit of Swords, and we need to accept that it's like that and try to bring back that sky from the edges of the card into that white light in the centre, so that we can clearly draw out the plan for how to move on with our lives from here.